Welcome to the Center for Fiction. My name is Melanie McNair. I'm the Senior Director of Public Programming here. I'm thrilled to see such a beautiful crowd and all of you filling this room with love. How many of you are visiting the Center for Fiction for the first time this evening? Oh, well, you're very welcome here. And I know some of you have traveled, but for those of you who live in Brooklyn, please come back and see us. We do events all the time. And we love to see familiar faces. I want to say a special thank you this evening to One Story and the Bellevue Literary Press for your partnership on tonight's event. We're here, of course, to celebrate the work of Adina Talve-Goodman and the publication of her book, Your Hearts, Your Scars. Her parents have traveled to Brooklyn from St. Louis, and I'm going to ask you to welcome her mother, Susan Talve, to the stage now. Thank you.
Oh, God, I hope Adina is here. I hope so. Yeah, I think so. You know, she was very close to her grandfather, who is still with us, but now not no longer in New York. He's in St. Louis with us. He says, "I can't believe I'm living in Missouri," but he every time I'm with him now, he asks me. He says, "You think there's something more after this life?" And gee, just tonight, I'm really hoping, more than ever, I'm hoping she's here. So there will be enough words. Already I spoke too many words, but that's what you would say. So there will be enough words filling this space tonight. Adina's careful, intentional words that make up her very good first book. But we, her family, want to thank you for being here tonight in person and streaming to see her many worlds come together in this wonderful bookstore. Adina loved bookstores. She also loved shoe stores, and she loved most stores. But we're grateful to come together in this bookstore to honor the publication of Your Hearts, Your Scars. Thank you, Sarika and Hannah and Mary Beth and Joe, for knowing what she would have wanted. And thank you to Bellevue Literary Press and Erica Goldman for getting the wisdom and truth and beauty of her writing. Thank you to the reviewers who wrote with such clarity and care and made it so personal for each of them and mentioned her. Some of them even mentioned her in their books. Thank you to the actors who will bring Adina's words to life tonight. So many of her worlds are here, from St. Louis and WashU and Iowa, her cousins and her glitter friends, and her one-story family. She loved you, and we love you so. The recipients of her fellowship, I think Nay, the first recipient, may be here tonight. And Arvin, if you are watching, we love you. She would have found a way to be friends with each and every one of you, and that was no small thing for Adina, because for Adina to be a friend was a commitment. Joe Firestone and Adina became friends in kindergarten and spent their lives loving each other and laughing through the many adventures and chapters of their lives, from filming as little kids in the forest being chased by bees, thank you, Joe, to burying opossums with the memorial prayers, yes, I did say the Kaddish for a possum, to bouncing through theater productions, stealing the show as thing one and thing two, to the edgier moments of near-naked clapometer shows, I saw one of those, and improv off Broadways. Wonderful, experimental, creative things that she would do when her friends would ask her, especially Joe. Joe and Adina are still friends, and having Joe to guide us through this event without Adina here physically for this makes it possible for us, whose hearts are scarred and broken now without her. Those of you who knew her know that Adina was never defined by her illness. So this was her first book about her experience of being a transplant recipient, but it would not have been her last. It might have been her first book, but the ones to come would have been about other aspects of living and mostly about loving. Most certainly about loving, because Adina loved large. Her last words to us were, I love you, she said. I love you. Her words in this book are a gift of love from Adina. We love you all for being here with us tonight to celebrate her work, her words. So please welcome Adina's dearest, oldest friend, Jo Firestone.
Are we doing good? This is very easy. Um, this is what. Give it up for Susie one more time for this wonderful voice. Welcome to the first public reading of Adina Talve-Goodman's "Your Hearts, Your Scars." Adina Talve-Goodman was a writer, a clown, a psychic, and a dear friend to many of us. There is a lot of love for Adina here in this room. Your Hearts, Your Scars is Adina's first published work. It's a collection of essays she wrote for the most part while attending the Iowa Writers Workshop. Hannah Tinty and Sarika Talve-Goodman worked together to edit her writing posthumously, and they did an impossible job so well. I think she would be very proud. It's certainly a bittersweet event. The book itself is wonderful. But with Adina not here, the magical thinking creeps in. What didn't get written yet? Every day I think, wouldn't it be wonderful if she were still here? In many ways, that's what this book is. Readers who knew her can hear her voice again, and readers who never knew her will meet her and fall in love just like we've all done. In life and in death, Adina is lovely. Tonight, 3 very accomplished readers have agreed to read excerpts from Your Hearts, Your Scars. Filmmaker, producer, and actor Ariel Kavusi, comedian, theater performer, and storyteller Nadia Pinder, and comedian, writer, and actor Maeve Higgins. Thank you for being here and enjoy the reading. Now I'll hand it over to Ariel Kavusi.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you for having me. My name's Ariel, as she just said. And this is I Must Have Been That Man. On a Monday night in October when I was 20, I walked home with a boy from a party drinking cheap whiskey and sharing puffs of his cigarette. We stopped on the stairs outside of my apartment and kissed. I asked if he wanted to spend the night. This is healthy, I told myself. This is college. In my room, we laughed and shushed each other, fumbling around with buttons and zippers until he took off my shirt. "What's this?" he said as he traced the scar down the middle of my chest, his fingers lingering on the keloids, the small hardened lumps of scar tissue that punctured the already prominent pink line. "I had a heart transplant," I said. "When?" "A year ago." "Oh." I waited for him to ask the usual questions. "Why did you need it? Are you okay now? What about the donor?" "You've great boobs," he said. After he fell asleep, I got out of bed and felt around in the dark for a shirt. I could only find his flannel, so I put it on like a robe and walked to the bathroom. I opened his shirt in front of the mirror and placed my fingers on each of the keloids, imagining I might be able to play my breastplate like an accordion, find the right note, and have the scar disappear. Even after a year, the straight scar down my chest hadn't become a part of my landscape like the rest. The 2 scars on my back that frame my shoulders like wings, the scars on each rib that tan in the summer and look like scrapes in the bark, and all the small ovals where suction tubes once were that could easily be birthmarks or sunspots. But the transplant scar remained surgical looking and wouldn't blend or sink. It sat there hanging just below my neck. To the left of the scar, I could see the new heart beating beneath my skin. Some nights, shortly after the surgery, it beat so hard I couldn't sleep. I would lie awake listening to its unfamiliar rhythm. Ba-bump, ba-bump. The new double pump song of perfection replacing the one wrong beat a single ventricle I had had before. Sometimes I'd fall asleep and dream of people dancing in ballets with symphonies coming out of their mouths when I expected words. I didn't tell anyone about the dreams. I was afraid they'd say that maybe it was the donor, maybe the donor had danced. I tried not to think about the donor much. I spent close to 2 years waiting, always wondering what the donor might mean, what might change in me. I'd seen kids lose themselves in their donors. They make websites dedicated to living the life that their donors never got to finish. They talk about their donor as if they were friends. When I enlisted, my parents, both rabbis, told me a story from the Talmud about a rabbi who goes to visit three sick men. And each time the rabbi asks, "Is your suffering dear to you?" That's the whole story, they explain, and it's the question that's important. I took it to mean this: when the time comes, will you be able to live without the heart defect that always made you special and strong? Will you be able to face wellness and normalcy? Will getting a good grade be as big of an accomplishment if you didn't have to study in the hospital to get it? So when the call came, I didn't ask where the heart was coming from or where it had been. And when I started dreaming in ballets, I didn't go looking for answers in my donor. Instead, I decided this must be how people with healthy hearts dream, in music and dancing, kicking off blankets and sheets in the middle of winter because my blood had never moved so fast through my veins and the warmth of it was almost unbearable. After the surgery, the doctor said that it would take a full year, for the heart to thaw and reach its capacity. Now, at almost a year, I stood in front of the mirror in a boy's shirt, wondering how long it was going to take until that new rhythm wouldn't keep me up at night. How long I would have to live with this new heart before it would feel like mine, and I would forget the years I'd spent waiting, getting too close to death. How many cigarettes I would have to smoke, how many boys I would take home to prove to myself and the new heart that this body was still my house. Is your suffering dear to you? No, I thought. In the morning, I hid his cigarettes and made him toast, and everything was funny again. We had headaches. We smelled like whiskey, and it was a Tuesday. After he left, I showered, got dressed, gathered my books, and stepped outside. It was October in St. Louis and not quite cold. The walk to campus wasn't long, 15 minutes, and even though I had a car, I walked it almost every day. I like to walk it alone. Before the transplant, 15 minutes was impossible. The doctors explained it to me like this: for you, in heart failure, a 15-minute walk is like a marathon, and that's why sometimes you throw up at the end. Doctors often explained my illness to me using sports metaphors, as if as a kid born with a single ventricle heart, sports was a language I ever learned to speak. I sat on my stoop and rubbed my head, regretting my decision to forgo a Tylenol. The boy from the night before was probably smoking a cigarette outside the library, not knowing the gift he had given me by not asking questions and treating my body like I hadn't been split down the middle and pieced back together. But now he knew that I walked around the campus with a perpetually broken chest plate and a very loud heart. And for that reason, I didn't want to see him again. I walked towards a coffee shop. I kept to the side streets and little alleys because I felt as if I might cry. And if I did, I didn't want to run into anyone who might try to talk to me about it. Halfway down the street, I saw a man lying on the ground, his electric wheelchair fallen beside him in the dirt. As I got closer, I recognized him. He rode around the loop a lot. I remember talking to him a few times when I would sit outside at the coffee shop. He always asked me what I was reading, but he never seemed to remember that we'd met before. Earlier that spring, he stopped by my table on a sunny day and said, "You're just lovely." I thanked him and I meant it because on some days after the surgery, I would look down at my chest to make sure it wasn't bleeding, to make sure you couldn't see that underneath my shirt I had been stapled together and might one day do something clumsy, slip on a sidewalk and come undone. I was put together fine, expertly in fact, but something remained unhealed in me that spring, and it comforted me to know that the world hadn't noticed. When I was close enough to speak to him, he propped himself on his elbow and adjusted his glasses. "Well, hello," he said. "Hi," I said. "Walking in the rain, huh?" I said. "I'm on my way to the coffee shop." "Oh, that's nice," he said as he tried to pull himself into sitting position. He couldn't manage to sit, so he continued to prop himself from one elbow to the other. I set my bag down on the ground. "Can I help?" I asked. "Oh, it happens all the time," he said. "My chair doesn't work so good in the rain. I'm saving for a new one. It's lighter and it goes faster. You look familiar. We've met outside the coffee shop. Oh, yes, you read a lot." I blushed. I'm a student. I've always been self-conscious of my reading, as if it betrays that I've stayed home for an embarrassing chunk of my life. "You must be a good one," he said. "I'm okay." There was a pause between us, and the rain picked up. "Can I help you get back in your chair?" I asked. "Oh, no," he said. I'll be just fine. I live right over there with my mother. I'll get up eventually. I just need a little time." "Can I call her for you?" I asked. No. She's still at work. She'll be home in an hour." "Well, maybe I can just turn the chair upright," I said. "Ha! I'd like to see you try." The chair was behind him, and somehow I managed to turn it right side up, but it wasn't easy. I'm not sure how I did it, and I don't think I could do it again. After I sat down beside him to catch my breath, I was already wet, so I took off the hood of my raincoat. You are stronger than you look," he said. We both laughed. "Do you want to try to get back in the chair?" I asked. "Well, it looks like you're some kind of weightlifter, so yeah, let's try." I hooked my arms underneath his shoulders and he pulled up on the wheelchair. On three, we both lifted, but the weight of his legs was too much. We fell back into the dirt. He was about 6 feet and over 300 pounds, with everything from his waist down tethering him to the ground. I couldn't lift him, not even a little. I wrapped my arms as far as I could around him as he pulled up on the wheelchair, but the few inches he got off the ground were from his own effort. While we were struggling and sort of hugging like that, he asked me what I did. I'm a student," I repeated. "But what do you study?" I was a women, gender, and sexuality studies major, but the last time I had said that to a man, he replied, "Yeah, me too," with a horrible wink. "I study theater. I'm an actress," I said. "Oh, yeah, I could see that. You're real pretty. I bet you're a good actress." Okay," I said again. "Are you in anything right now?" "I am, comedy at my college." We lifted again, and from behind me I heard a gruff, "Hey!" We fell, and I turned to see a white pickup truck. The driver gave us the up and down and said to me, "You all right?" I looked around like maybe there was someone else in trouble. Then I realized what the truck driver must have seen. Tiny white girl struggling beneath the weight of a large black man on a side street in St. Louis. "I'm fine," I said. "We were just trying to get him back in the chair." It's his chair. Um, the man's brow unfurrowed, and suddenly he saw the electric wheelchair as if it hadn't been there before. He parked his pickup in the middle of the street and climbed down to help. We tried to lift the man with just the two of us a few times, but still couldn't manage to set him in the chair. Because the man was so tall, the seat of the wheelchair was high off the ground, and because of the rain, the chair had short circuited and the seat wouldn't lower. "Wait here," the man with the truck said. "I'm working construction a block away. I'll get my guys." He took off running down the alley, leaving his truck parked in the middle of the street. I sat down to wait beside the man whose name I didn't know. The rain picked up and the dirt around us started to mud. "You can go," the man said. "It's so nice of you to wait, but I'll be all right. It'll come back on the chair. It always does." My heart was pounding from trying to lift the man. I looked at him now, sitting propped against his chair, and couldn't find the words. I thought about unzipping my jacket, peeling off my high-necked shirt, and showing him my chest, pointing to each and every scar, hoping this might act as our common language. Here, I would say, was a suction tube that stayed in for 3 days. Here is where they do biopsies every 6 months now by taking little pieces of the heart out through my neck. Here is where my muscles were cut when I was 4 years old for a repair that didn't work. I wanted to explain to him that I wasn't good at much, but I was good at waiting. How I had waited nearly 2 years for a heart, and a year ago I had come so close to death that sometimes I worry the smell of it lingers on my body, and maybe that's the reason I buy so many clothes and creams. So when I said, "I'm happy to sit here with you," I meant it with all of my heart. Thanks.
The condition of my transplanted heart is one of remembering. The heart came from somewhere in the Midwest by plane to St. Louis Children's Hospital during Game 5 of the 2006 World Series between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Detroit Tigers. My mother heard cheers as a surgeon stepped off the elevator with the cooler containing the organ. She took a picture of the surgeon and the cooler in the same moment that Adam Wainwright threw the final pitch, a strike to Brandon Inge, and the Cardinals became champions. In the picture, the surgeon is smiling. The cooler containing the organ is navy blue, and the surgeon holds it with one hand. Years after the transplant, I find the photo on my mother's phone while trying to help her clear space for more memory. She asked me to leave it there because she sometimes likes to look at it. I zoom in on the cooler. It's the closest I've ever come to seeing the heart now inside my chest or a picture of the donor. My own heart I've seen. After it was taken out, I asked if I could bring it home with me. It was an unusual request, one the hospital had never filled before. My cardiologist asked if it was a Jewish thing. My parents are rabbis, and they both said, no, it's not a Jewish thing to take your organs home with you. All I could say was that I wanted it. It had been mine, and I didn't want it to be thrown away. So they released it to me in an urn through a funeral parlor as my own remains. I suppose it does remain, in a way, as evidence of the great event. I now have 2 hearts in my possession, one inside and one out, in an urn. The process of getting my heart released took a few weeks. I went to the hospital for a checkup around Thanksgiving, and my doctor presented me with a square wooden box. It was the cheapest urn, my mother said. My family doesn't usually do much for Thanksgiving, but the year of the transplant, our gratitude was overwhelming. So we made about 7 kinds of pie and then opened the box to view the heart. Inside, there was a white, round, tall plastic container. And inside that container, my heart. We all wore plastic gloves. We put newspaper down on the table in case the liquid the heart was preserved in dripped. I removed my heart and held it in 2 hands because it was large, pale yellow, and deformed, but it hardly dripped. We passed it around and said thanks. Thanks to my old heart for doing all it could. Thanks to my new heart for being so good. Thanks to each other for coming home. I thought about the donor's family. It overwhelmed me to think that somewhere not so far away, there was someone young like me, small like me, with O positive blood like mine, missing from a table. My family's gratitude, our joy, comes in large part from another family's grief. It's not a direct correlation nor a direct result. I did not cause that death, but I did wait for it to come for a very long time, and when it did, I was grateful. But what would make the condition of my transplanted heart not quite grieving, not quite gratitude? What can I call the crawl space in between? When you're on a transplant list as a child, before the age of 18, as I did, you're required to go through a psychological evaluation. Sometimes kids lose themselves in their transplants and donors. They miss their illness because it made them special. Sometimes donors can become a way of avoiding the overwhelming possibilities and responsibilities that come with wellness. Kids say they are living their life the donor left behind. I've struggled with what my obligations are to the donor as well. It's a kind of self-preservation, I think, that I have not yet asked to know who the donor was. I might someday. But lately, I think more about the space of grief in the transplant process. If it's possible to inhabit grief and gratitude at the same time, to respect the heart, the gift of it, and also believe it can never be truly earned or deserved. In the Talmud, it says that Shimon bar Yochai, the paradigm for Jewish mystical teachers and miracle workers, lived with one eye laughing and one eye crying. On the 10-year anniversary of the transplant, I go walking in the cemetery near my home in Iowa City. I make my way to the bodies donated to Science Garden. There's a podium, but nowhere to sit. I stand with an open notebook, ready to speak. I go up and down on the balls of my feet. I don't pray often, but when pressed, I forget the words. Up and down, up and down. My father used to say that in this motion, davening, is how angels pray, standing on their toes because their souls, like shoes, are hot with holiness. But it's October and I'm cold, standing in mist so fine that I can only see it when it lands on the pages of my open notebook. I press a hand to my chest. I search through my coat, the layers of shirts for the heartbeat. How does it begin? I can't remember, so I walk in circles until my cheeks flush and I feel ready to take death's hand. I whisper that I have been well, and then all the ways I am worried my life won't go right, all the ways I have embraced wellness. I might not be able to write a book. I might never find a partner. I might never have children. I might never get a haircut I like. Death kisses me slow, familiar, and I go quiet. I remember all the things I could not do before, and suddenly the movement of my legs, the hunger in my stomach, the cold October morning, and my ability to stay warm are enough. We walk on, and I recite the mourner's Kaddish for the donor and the family for whom, 10 years ago, they lost some light. I sit beside death all morning, tracing the scar that runs up and down my chest. 10 years went so quickly, I say. I think of that picture my mother has in her phone of the cooler containing the heart. She told me she keeps it just to remember the moment. Maybe that's what the crawl space is between grief and gratitude. Remembrance or memory. Maybe that is the condition of my transplanted heart, one of remembering.
thank you so much for asking me to be part of this evening. I absolutely love the book. That's how I met Adina, through her writing. I mean, that's the only way really that I've come to know her, through her writing, because I didn't know her. My name is Maeve, and I think it's such a great, it's such an auspicious time for this book, because today is St. Bridget's Day in where I'm from, which is Texas, in Ireland. St. Bridget, she's a Catholic saint, but she was kind of stolen by the Catholics. She was a pagan priestess, and she was, you know, and she was a writer too, a poet. She's the patron saint of women, and she's the patron saint of refugees as well. So it's a great time for this book. And I'm thrilled to be reading this piece, which is called Thank God for the Nights That Go Right. And I'm just going to raise this a little bit, if I can. I'm kind of a basketballer, sort of an athlete. You can still see me? Okay, anyway, it's the words. Okay. Thank God for the nights that go right. I stood next to a man at a bar with a $4 beer in one hand, my coat in the other, and no good way to grab my pills at 10 p.m. I'd spent a lot of nights at bars that week, and I'd missed my 10 p.m. deadline more than once. It's the easiest thing, the only thing I have to do, really, to stay alive. Just take the pills at the same time every morning and every night in order to have the perfect amount of medicine in my system so that my body doesn't suddenly wake up and say, fuck this heart. Rip it up. It doesn't belong. I didn't know much about the man, or rather, I knew a few small things and one large thing. We'd both had heart transplants. It's not really bar talk. He was a friend of my friend Joey. Joey was the friend I'd called first when we knew the heart was coming. The friend who sat on my bed as I packed my bag for the hospital. The friend who got me through. The best friend. She was part of a house improv team at the Upright Citizens Brigade with the man. They practiced and performed every week. Joey called me late one night when she was walking home from rehearsal, after he told her that he'd had a heart transplant. She talks fast when she's excited. He's 14 years out, she said. 14! Before the transplant, doctors told me a new heart would last for 10 good years. Not just 10 years, but 10 good years. After that, the kidneys might start to fail from one kind of immunosuppressant, you might get skin cancer from another, or the arteries might start to harden for reasons they can't quite explain. I was at 7 and doing, as one doctor put it, beautifully. I'd had no rejection, no hardening of the arteries, no signs of decline in any other organ. There are reasons for all these things, better medicines, a good diet, etc. But I am more comfortable calling it luck. I went to their next improv show alone. After, I found Joey at the bar. She asked if I wanted her to introduce me to the man with 14 years, if I was sure. I thanked her for asking. It's nice to have a friend who holds my secrets like they are her secrets too. I shook his hand, and one of the other members of the improv team standing nearby said, "Hey, you guys are heart twins." Not really, I thought, because that's not a thing. Thank God. We stepped over to the bar together to get drinks and talk about this largeness between us. I ordered a pork slap. We talked about what meds we were each on and what doctors we saw in the city. We'd seen the same cardiologist at one time, but he'd switched. He didn't get many checkups anymore, just an annual, almost like any other red-blooded American. Me too, sort of, I said. I explained that I had gone to India recently, so they'd made me get every shot imaginable and then come by for a few checkups after the trip. I think we cheersed to that. He'd had his transplant in Maryland during college. Mine was during college too, I said. In St. Louis. Joey was there. He asked why I needed it. I told him I was in heart failure from the time I was 12, and I had waited for the heart for nearly 2 years. His story was different. He'd never had any issues growing up, but he got sick in college, an infection or something, and he needed a transplant immediately. He waited for less than 2 weeks. You're fast, I'm slow, I thought. Your trauma must be so different from mine. There were long, awkward pauses during our conversation at the bar when I should have been asking him more questions. Him at 14 years, nice and willing to answer, but I couldn't even make proper eye contact with him. The questions I still have, the ones about death and donors and borrowed time, they seemed out of place standing at the bar, pork slap in one hand and heart in the other. So I asked instead what he was up to now. He worked in healthcare. To give back, he said. I put my coat between my knees and checked the time on my phone, 10:35 p.m. I mentally kicked myself around for failing to check the clock earlier and dug in my bag for my medicine. I took it fast with a swig of beer, and the man told me he took his pills at 9 and 9. He said something about my looking good, something along the lines of being surprised when Joey had told him I'd had a transplant. I didn't know what to say. I should. It's something I've heard a lot in the years since I received the heart. That I am unpatient-like, that you cannot tell with my clothes on, the freakishness of my distinctly modern body. As if illness should be uglier, more grotesque. I should have said that I, too, was surprised by his wellness, his unfreakishness. I was afraid, however, that he might take it as flirting. Joey came over. I'm not sure if it was by luck or because she noticed the man and I weren't really talking anymore. She said she had to run to another show. I told her I'd walk with her to the subway. I said goodbye, nice to meet you, to Mr. 14 years. While we were walking to the train, I apologized to Joey. I told her I was weird and awkward with her friend. I kind of lost it when he said he worked in healthcare. I said, why? She asked. I don't know. He's just so together. He was probably like, that girl is covered in trauma. I don't think people think like that, Joey said. I'm sure it was weird for him too. Are you okay? I think so. I just feel shitty, like a shit person, like a person made of shit. She gave me a hug, patted me on my head like she sometimes does, and told me to give myself a break. We boarded the F train, going in opposite directions, and I thought about my 7 years since the transplant. I am starting to trust that I might live a while longer than expected. 14 years, beyond, in good health. What will I do with all that time? How will I ever be worthy of it? There were delays on the F train and I had to get off and transfer to the C. I don't usually take the C train, but that night I had no choice. As I waited on the platform, I tried to think of all the ways I could be better. I could go to the gym more. I could go to the gym at all. I could volunteer again at a hospital the way I used to do in high school, but I hated it then. And I only did it then as a way to spend time with the boy I had a crush on. He wanted to volunteer at a children's hospital, so I did too, even though I had spent plenty of time there already. As a patient, I hated volunteers, especially this woman and her Dalmatian who used to go from room to room dressed the same, asking if you needed a little love and remarking to me that a smile really was my best medicine. My mother would kindly usher her out of the room or lie and say I was allergic to dogs. I love dogs, which is why I think putting green glitter eyeshadow and tutus on them is cruel. You should tell her that she can't come in because she's terrible, I would say, and my mother would laugh. Before the transplant, my parents took me to see an abbot. They're both rabbis, and my mother had a habit of taking me to every healer who rolled through town while I was growing up. Mostly they didn't work, but sometimes we had miracles. The abbot was not a healer, though, my parents said. He was just a holy man. We sat in his office, my mother, father, and I. He asked me if I had any questions for him or for God. I was tired. I had been waiting a year already, and I was declining in health and sanity. I asked the abbot if it was okay not to know if I wanted the heart to come. I asked him if it was okay to sometimes smoke cigarettes in Vermont with my boyfriend, if I couldn't do that anymore when the new heart came because it wouldn't be mine to destroy the way this one was. I asked him if it was okay that I had thought about it a great deal, and I did not want to know the donor or think of them every day because I liked the person I was and I didn't want to risk losing myself to an organ. I asked him how I could deserve the heart better. I did not cry. My parents were quiet. The abbot was soft-spoken. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and had white hair. He stayed still when he spoke, occasionally raising his hand to point to nothing in particular. I think, he said, that these are good questions. It's good to ask questions, but now that you've asked, he raised his hand. You can rest. He continued, you need a new heart, you'll get a new heart. And the hardest part, God willing, will be your waiting. So perhaps you give up. Give it all up to God. The words we use to describe the sick, how we praise those who put on a brave face, how I received extra stickers and lollipops when I did not cry as a child, how we call people who don't complain strong and often compare illness to illness and then say, it can always be worse. We demand gratitude. The abbot offered me a way out of that narrative, a silver branch to lift me out of the thinking that things could always be worse, a break from a crushing kind of gratitude. Give up. I imagined myself sinking to the bottom of a great body of water, not swimming and not able to breathe until I reached the bottom. The night before the call came, I sat in the passenger seat of Joey's green minivan, a defibrillator vest strapped to my chest and an IV in my arm. I cried so hard, I started to gag. I want it so bad, I said. I give up. She repeated it was coming, over and over again, as she rubbed the part of my back not taken up by the vest. My heart was beating very fast. And there was a beeping from inside my bag, a warning that the vest would shock me in 15 seconds if I did not press the right button on the battery pack because an arrhythmia might be pending. I dug around my bag and I could not find the battery. Adina, don't be funny. Adina, please, find the fucking battery. I'm trying, I laughed. I found it with a few seconds to spare and the pack was quiet once again. I turned to Joey and apologized for scaring her. When the surgeons removed my old heart, they said I was lucky my liver wasn't failing. I was lucky to be alive. I couldn't have waited any longer. Thank you, I said to everyone in the hospital that week I recovered. Thank you, thank you, thank you, compulsively, like a tick, until thank you was the only sound I made in exhalation before sleep. It was nearly midnight when I stepped off the C train and started walking down the platform toward the Washington Avenue exit. And there he was, the man from the bar, my heart twin. He was on the platform, heading towards the opposite exit, and hadn't seen me. We'd been on the same train, in different cars. I paused and recognized my choice. I could say something, or not. Jesse, I yelled. Hey, Jesse! He turned around and we walked back toward each other. We met in the middle and I said, I'm sorry for being so weird at the bar. Oh, me too, he said. It's not something I talk about in bars or otherwise. It's not something I usually share with people. Me neither, he said. But you should know, it delighted me and Joey to hear 14 years. We laughed a little, then we hugged and said maybe we get coffee sometime and we do it right. Then we parted ways. Above ground, I had missed calls from my dad and my mom. Now that I live in New York, we usually talk while I'm walking somewhere. I can still hear the delight in their voices when they ask, what are you doing? And I reply that I'm walking. I called my dad because he was more likely to be awake. He asked me where I was, and I told him the whole story of the night, of the boy with 14 years, of Joey, of the train delays and the subway stop I never go to. At the end, I said, sometimes the universe just shouts, I got you, you know, and you feel right. Yeah, he said, that's like God.
That was like slow-mo. Hi, everybody. I'm Hannah Tinty from One Story. And this is the fabulous Erica Goldman from Bellevue Literary Press. It's so wonderful to be here tonight. It's so great to see all your faces, so many people from so many different parts of Adina's life. And we just wanted to talk a little bit about how the book came together. And I want to start by just asking Erica to talk about when we sent you this book. You didn't know Adina. And why did you decide to publish it?
I was spoken to by Adina through her writing. And I decided to publish the book because I fell in love with her writing. Simple as that.
And how do you think it aligns with the mission of Bellevue?
The mission of Bellevue is capacious. And what we're really about is publishing work that investigates the nature of consciousness and embodiment. And clearly, Adina's writing does that.
It does. It does. I want to speak a little bit about how the book came together. None of it would have happened without her sister, Sarika. Sarika is the one who went through all of Adina's writing. She's also the person that Adina shared her work, I think, the most with Sarika, and would give her work as she was working on different essays. So she was sort of the most tied into that part of Adina's life. And so this really was the book that Adina was working on. It's not a finished book. It's an unfinished manuscript. But Sarika actually had this great, in her introduction to the book, has this great line that she wrote, when you read a book that's unfinished or, a posthumous publication like this, to read it with softness. And I thought that was really great. You approach it with softness, because this is obviously not the final words of what she would have done, although all of these essays were ones that she was working on, that she was close to finishing, and all the editing that we did on it, we used other drafts of hers. So all the words are Adina's words. There's nothing added here from us. It was just about trying to find the best version of it and to do some shaping.
And I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
I didn't hear anything awkward tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, the readings were beautifully moving and convincing.
And then when we would work after Sarika had gathered the manuscript, then she came to us at One Story to help shape it and put it together, and I worked with Sarika doing that editing. And so I would do, when you're doing posthumous editing, a lot of times I would call her up and be like, what do you think she meant when she was saying this? And then we sort of talk it through, and then we'd shape it a little bit just so that it was getting as close as we possibly could to what Adina was trying to say. I always feel like that's my job as an editor, is to help a writer communicate what they are trying to say more clearly to her audience. But we were out to lunch today, and with Susan and Jimmy, and something came up that we thought was also really important. That I've been teaching writing now for almost 20 years, which makes me feel very old. But I've seen students that I've worked with publish their first books, and then their second, and then their third, and always the first book is something that they've been carrying with them, something that they're trying to figure out about their lives. And then they write other books that are about completely other subjects. And that's the thing about, for those of you who knew Adina, she didn't talk about being a transplant patient. This was even though it was a big thing in her life, it was also a very small part of who she was. It did not define her. this is her first book because this is something I think she was trying to understand and figure out by writing about it. She didn't really talk to people about it very much. So it's interesting for those of you who are meeting her for the first time on the page, you're actually meeting this side of her that's very different. But I think it's very important. And I think that the writing is magnificent and a work of art, really.
Well, I can tell you that I didn't have to intervene at all.
Yeah.
So I was grateful for that.
Yeah.
You guys did a fabulous job.
Thank you. And so I just want to thank Sarika for all of the effort and love that she put into this book. She says that this was a book made of love and grief by Adina and us. And I think that that is sort of perfectly captures what it's all about. We are running short on time, so I think what we're probably going to do is have a Q&A, but have that over in the reception area. But I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you might have about the book. Just come up and talk to me about it or talk to Erica about it. I guess lastly, I just want to say that I think that this book is extraordinary. I think that this is the beginning of something. I think about what Adina's second book might have been, what her third book might have been. I feel like she would have written like a whole novel about clowns. You know, Adina was always, at one story, was like my partner in crime. A lot of times I like to pull off crazy things, and she would always be game, like getting all of her friends to dress up as cigarette girls and sell punctuation, and people bought it. Like we did that at one of the balls. She helped me construct giant typewriters out of paper, mobiles. Anyway, she was full of so much life. And so the loss of her is really unbearable at times. But I do feel like she was here tonight, and those readings were magnificent. I'm going to turn it back to Joe, I think, if Joe's game for coming back up, and then we'll, I don't know, have a drink.
Keep it going for Erica and Hannah and your readers tonight, Ariel and Nadia and Maeve. I think I'm just here to tell you that there's drinks. I'm not sure why I'm telling you that, but you know, it was a beautiful thing that we could all be here together. And Susan and Jim they're giving us wine and cheese, and it'll just be in the cafe over there. And so enjoy. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. That's great. Very sweet.